GDP equals C plus I plus G. What is that? We talked to two experts in energy and agriculture that really want to discuss and break down the crude truth on the tariffs and what's going to happen next on this episode of The Crude Truth.
In 1901, at Spindletop Hill near Beaumont, the future of Texas changed dramatically as, like a fountain of fortune, thousands of barrels of oil burst from the earth towards the sky. Soon, Detroit would be cranking out Model Ts by the millions, and America was on the move, thanks to the black gold being produced in Texas. Now, more than a century later, the vehicles are different, but nothing else has truly changed. Sure, there may be many other alternative energy sources like wind and solar and electric. But let's be honest, America depends on oil and entrepreneurs, and if the USA is truly going to be independent, it has to know the crude truth.
This episode is brought to you by LFS Chemistry. We are committed to being good stewards of the environment. We are providing the tools so you can be too. NAPE Expo, where deals happen. Air Compressor Solutions. When everything is on the line, Air Compressor Solutions is the dependable choice to keep commercial business powered up. Sandstone Group. Exec Crew. Elevate your network, elevate your knowledge. Texas Star Alliance. Pecos Country Operating. Fueling our future.
Well, thank you as always in tuning in for another episode of The Crude Truth. This is just a wild time in the economy as we record today. I'm going to do my best to be getting this one out as quickly as possible because news happens at the pace of news and everything's going on, and it couldn't happen at a better time because I have on two returning guests that almost both of them now could be co-hosts at the same time. Two industry leaders, two individuals that are understanding the commodities, what's going on with agriculture and how energy is affecting it and how the two collide, help each other out and not help each other out. My guests today are the one, the only, Sarah Tate and Dr. Ed Ireland. Guys, how are y'all?
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh,
Doing great. Great to be back.
Oh, well, it's great to have you both back on. And we've already been talking for an hour in post-production or pre-production, just about everything that's going on. Sarah, for everybody out there, first of all, congratulations again. For those that out there that don't know, you are 2024's 30 under 30 in the agriculture world with the Cowgirl magazine. And that's what brings you back to Fort Worth again this year for that same event. And as I was saying, what a perfect time to be back because of everything that's going on with the tariffs, with OPEC, and really where the state of the economy is right now. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a really interesting time to be an attorney because there's a lot of unprecedented things happening. And so it's very exciting to get to see how things are unfolding and continue to use my background to try to predict what's happening next.
But you talk about that, since last year, you have been on a whirlwind. I mean, let's just talk about that just for a brief second here. I mean, what have you been up to? You've been up to a lot.
Yes, I had a baby 4.5 months ago. And so I've been my first child. And so I've been learning how to be a mom while getting back into working. I took a couple of months off. I'm teaching at the University of Wyoming again this semester, and all of those things have certainly kept me very busy. I moved into town. I had been living in a camper trailer in the middle of one of our cow pastures, and so adjusting to living in town has definitely also kept me very busy.
Well, I was joking saying, well, with you and your husband, as often as y'all been to the great state of Texas in the last year, y'all may just need to start finding some real estate here, and we could use the help, sure, especially from an agriculture standpoint.
Well, I think that my dad would be a little disappointed if we got a ranch down here and quit helping him in Wyoming. But we did have some longhorn calves. We had a longhorn bull get in with our cows this year. And so we have some longhorn calves that would fit in this state perfectly.
Now, when you say get in, did it get in on purpose or by accident? It was
on accident. We do not run longhorns. And
you don't want those scrawny big things?
with the big horns? No, that's not really what we do on our ranch. So, but we can start those down here.
So did you find out whose it is?
Yeah, so we actually found out it was a Longhorn bull and a Holstein bull, which for those who don't know, that's a milk cow, got into our pasture.
A milk cow and a Longhorn, or one that's both?
No, one Longhorn and one Holstein from a subdivision that's near some ground that we lease, got into our pasture and bred several of our cows. So we haven't had any Holstein calves yet. Little milk cow crosses. We haven't had any of those yet, but we've definitely had some Longhorns.
No. Oh my gosh.
So those fit in down here a lot better than they fit in Wyoming.
Absolutely. And Dr. Ireland, how are you doing, sir?
Doing great, thanks.
It could be a better time with you having your, your background in economics. When I asked you to be on, when Sarah told me she was coming back into town, I was like, oh, I want to have you on at the same time. And in our pre-production meeting, it's already been going great. I mean, I knew that it would be right there, just like last time when I had Dr.
We have plenty to talk about.
We do. How are you doing?
Doing great.
Yeah?
Yeah, really good.
Yeah. What are you thinking about the whole economy right now?
It's all exciting. Everything's changing.
Right.
And that's good. I think there's a lot that needs to be changed, but especially on the energy side. Mm-hmm. And that just, it couldn't be a more exciting time now in the energy business, and just for the economy and the importance of energy. It's really changing quickly, and it needed to be changed. We were way off in the weeds in this country. Well, most of the world is too, right. And still is, on how economies need to be powered. Mm-hmm. And, we got all into this wind and solar thing and de-emphasizing fossil fuels. Mm-hmm. And the world has been discovering that doesn't really work. Power grids especially don't work with wind and solar. There can be some, but they can't be all, right. Unless you want to do everything during the day when the sun is shining. Solar power doesn't work very good at night. So all of that was being discovered already, or I'd say the reality of it was sinking in when President Trump was elected, and really codified all of that into executive orders. And now that's being further codified into the Energy Department and really all of the departments in the federal government. And so it's a massive change that was needed.
You mentioned two things there that I want to talk about, and they're kind of separate, which is one is the executive orders, and then also what's going on with the departments and everything that's going on. And I guess we'll start there because, in my teaser, I used your little mathematical equation, GDP equals C plus I plus G, which is gross domestic production is equal to consumption, investment, and government.
Right, just as a simple way of representing it. Yeah.
Right. And, Sarah said something very, very awesome also during the beginning in our meeting. And it was like, oh, wow, it really helps because that's when you said that part, which was, you said, it's a real interesting time right now to see what's going on because there's so much deregulation going on, but also there's so many people that are getting let go from government entities right now. And, you mentioned, one of the first things I asked you was like, hey, what do you want to talk about? And you're like, oh, well, let me tell you about this, where it's now getting better. So can we talk about that entity and also what you're seeing here, what's happening, why it's concerning that we're letting all these people go, even though we probably all are okay with it?
Sure. So as far as executive agencies go, most of them are created by one law or another. And the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, is a law that really impacts all energy industries, all agriculture industries, anything that has to do with federal lands or federal money, even just $1 federal dollar, federal permit. You have to go through what's called the NEPA process, which is an environmental process where an industry, if you're starting a project, you have to figure out what kind of an environmental impact that project is going to have on the environment. And the regulatory agency that had been writing regulations for that is called the Council on Environmental Quality. Okay. And the CEQ was given its authority through NEPA, And in NEPA, it actually says that the CEQ is supposed to advise the president on various environmental policies. So everybody had just assumed that that meant that they had the authority to be writing regulations. And so regulations are supposed to be clarifying laws. And so the CEQ has been writing regulations since the 1970s.
Okay.
And a court last year decided that the CEQ did not have any authority to be writing regulations. And following that, on one of his first days in office, President Trump wrote an executive order directing the CEQ to completely get rid of all of its regulations. None of them are valid anymore.
Okay.
So 50 years of regulations just went away.
Whoa. And
that's a really big deal, and is going to have really big impacts on how NEPA is implemented, which certainly from, in the West has a really, really big impact, but also in Eastern states, because if you have to get a federal permit or use any federal dollars at all, you have to go through the NEPA process. And so it's having huge impacts.
Wow. Where are some places right now that you're seeing like these impacts that are going on?
So it's so new. It's just, so when President Trump wrote his executive order, he gave the CEQ, I think it was 60 days.
Okay.
Or maybe it was 45 days, something like that, to get rid of all of their regulations. And so that change just happened a couple of weeks ago.
Gotcha.
And so I have not seen any direct impacts yet, but it's absolutely going to, because now, NEPA is also has to work with other agencies. So the Bureau of Land Management or the Fish and Wildlife Service or, the Federal Energy Commission, whatever, has to go through the NEPA process. And so now instead of having one entity that's writing regulations, whoever is doing the project has to go through, whatever agency they're working with. So if it's an energy project and they have to talk to FERC, they have to follow FERC regulations. But then if they're doing a project on federal lands and are working with the BLM, they have to go through BLM regulations. So on one hand, it has decentralized the CEQ. Okay. But now instead of having one entity that's writing regulations that have to be followed, projects have to go to individual agencies that can have all different regulations. And so there's less government, but it's very possibly going to be more complicated because instead of having one agency, you have all of the agencies that get to write regulations.
You would never kind of think about that less government, more government means more complicated, but in this scenario, quite the opposite.
Yes.
With all this deregulation going on right now, Dr. Ireland, it's on the energy side, it's on the agriculture side, and it's affecting us all for the most part as industry individuals in agriculture, ranching, oil and gas, in a positive way as far as the deregulations go. What are you seeing though? Would you say that's true, or do you think that we're actually seeing some things from the economy that deregulating is not helping us out right now for the economy standpoint?
One of President's main promises was to deregulate. I don't remember the number he ended up with, but he was going to, for every he's going to eliminate 10 for every one they write or something like that.
Right.
So I don't know how that will be counted exactly, but the whole point was deregulation. And it's very important because all regulations have costs. No matter how minor they may appear, there is a cost involved in that regulation. If nothing else, it's just proving that you're complying with the regulation. And compliance costs are a tremendous cost in the economy, and really, they're a wasted cost, so to speak. You're just complying with a regulation that may not even have any positive impact. It's just a regulation that's been around forever. And so the whole idea of deregulating, as a free market economist that I am, that's one of the best things that can be done to help this economy, is deregulate. And reduce all of those costs and misallocation of resources that comes from it. Because not all regulations were written, a lot of regulations were written with a certain group in mind. Okay. In other words, they were one-sided, not necessarily a regulation that would improve the economy or make the economy work better. It was just something that was politically expeditious at the time.
Okay.
And then these regulations get piled on top of regulations. I've seen the statement that we all are guilty of violating some regulation or perhaps many regulations every day. We all violate them because we don't even know what they are. There are so many. And so it's very inefficient and very costly. And so getting rid of regulations is a great step in every way.
Even though right now the economy is just, I get asked that question a lot right now. I was like, is the economy bad? And I really don't know the answer. I usually say I've never seen an economy like this before. But with all the deregulation that's going on, we also have OPEC doing what they're doing on the oil and gas and energy side, but we also have all these tariffs. And I saw a funny joke the other day, and I do want to talk about tariffs and how they're affected, but I did see a funny joke where they were like, never knew we had so many tariff experts out there, because all of a sudden, right, we have them, and now everybody has something to say about them. But I want to talk about just from an effective standpoint. Sarah, again, in our pre-production meeting, I was like, well, what do you see going on with the tariffs and how are they affecting you guys with the ranching and the agriculture side of things? And, that was a very great conversation. And so it's like, do you think it's a good thing right now? And are y'all going to see any effects, especially from the cattle industry, which is huge?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people are very nervous about how the tariffs are going to impact the cost of goods. And so, as we had been talking about, the cattle market had been the highest that it's ever been. Right. And then in the last couple of weeks, it's been free falling. Okay. And I am not an economist, but I think that a lot of people are changing their spending habits right now in anticipation of what's going to happen with commodities. And so a lot of agriculture producers, while generally being very favorable of President Trump, in general, most agriculturalists are a little nervous about what happens if other countries slow down their purchase of the United States agriculture commodities. Because in agriculture, we are not price makers, we're price takers. And so whatever the consumer is willing to purchase a product at, we have to sell it for. And at the same time, all of our inputs, we also don't have any control in how much we can spend on inputs. The cost of diesel, the cost of equipment, fertilizer, et cetera. We don't have any control over those prices. And so agriculture is really a middleman that has to bend at the whim of the economy. Yeah.
I see you over here nodding your head and agreeing over here, Dr. Ireland, all the way.
Well, I think President Trump extols the virtues of tariffs all the time.
Okay.
And, he's made references to say, well, we could eliminate personal income taxes just by raising our tariff. But in the end, I think what he has said that really is where he's working toward is that the best tariffs are no tariffs. And we don't tariff you if you won't tariff us. And that is the most economically efficient situation to be in. But what had happened over time is the rest of the world were imposing tariffs on U.S. goods, and we were not imposing tariffs on their goods. I mean, it's just like automobiles. I think our average tariff is somewhere around 2%. And for imported cars, German cars, Italian cars, whatever. Whereas the average tariff on U.S. made cars into most countries is 20% or higher. And so just one case, someone the other day said, go to Japan, you will not see an American car at all.
Oh, wow.
What about Japanese cars in the U.S.? Lots of them. Yeah. Lots of German cars. And that's, a lot of it is just tariffs. And so ideally, we all just get rid of tariffs. It's like, if you're going to be 10%, we'll be at 10%. Or then you say, well, if we're going to do that, let's just be at 0.
Yeah.
Isn't that the same? Isn't that better?
Yeah.
And so I think that's where it's working too. But you only get there with some really shrewd negotiation and a pretty big hammer.
Yeah.
Claiming, I'm going to use this hammer on you if you don't, play this game with us and reduce tariffs against U.S. goods. I think that's where it's headed. But it's very destabilizing, as you can see in the market, 3,000 point swings in one day.
Right.
Because the market's very nervous about where this is going to end up. Are we going to tariff ourselves into not being able to sell U.S. goods? And I don't think that's where it's headed at all.
When you talk about the tariffs, and you said that the beef market was at the highest it ever been. Are y'all concerned about the drop? Or are you kind of seeing this as a reset when it comes to the price of beef?
I think ultimately it is going to be a reset. The problem that you run into in agriculture and specifically, really across all commodities, but really in the cattle industry, is we only get paid once a year.
Right.
And a lot of cattle producers, when you sell your cattle, that you get your big check and then you have to make that last all year. We don't get paid every 2 weeks like a lot of other jobs do. And so if the market falls enough that you can't make it to the next year, you run out of money, then a lot of people are going to go out of business.
Okay.
And so while ultimately I think that it is going to be a reset, it's very daunting in industries where you have to make it a whole year off of one check. How long is it going to take before we're actually reset?
Wow. That's tough. And with that being said, with the way the markets are and these tariffs, I just want to know, where do you see this going? I mean, do you think it'll be long term? That's kind of a question for both of y'all. Dr. Allen, you want to go first? And if I may, you keep saying you're not an economic expert, but the expert's like nodding his head all the time, agreeing with you. So I think what you're doing.
That's very reassuring for me.
What do you think, Dr. Allen?
The tariffs are headed? Is that the question?
Yeah. Well,
I think they're headed to zero.
Okay.
And some countries are not going to go to zero, but then we will not go to zero either.
Yeah.
So there again, it's the negotiation, and I really do think Trump's target is to get to zero tariffs. I mean, he's alluded to the fact that before the income tax, which was in the early 1900s, the country operated on tariffs. That's how the United States got money.
Right.
But that was a different world. And, now we trade freely with the whole world. But that has not been free. Mm-hmm. That's the goal, but it's been very much one-sided against the United States up to this point, because just our history has been presidents have allowed all of these tariffs to be piled on U.S. goods. And by the way, that really started as a way for the United States to help the world rebuild after World War II. That's where we were saying, we'll let you tariff, you tariff U.S. goods and as a source of income, for you, and we won't tariff your goods in order to kind of give you a little boost to help rebuild after World War II. And that just continued to continue for years, for decades, up until now.
So we were almost like Santa Claus.
Very much so. Exactly.
I mean, my dad always jokes that, when you go out and you might have one or two more, and the next thing you know, you're Santa Claus just, buying stuff for everybody. And so the moment we became a superpower, which was after World War II, we were like, hey, we'll help you out. Because I was really kind of going to ask you that question, like, when did this whole thing start?
Yeah, that's when it started. And President Trump has been repeating the number the last few days that, the United States has lost 90,000 factories, 90,000 companies, factories that manufacture stuff in this country just in the last decade. And that's significant.
Yeah.
And that's why we've, the Rust Belt, as they call it, is that for a reason. It's been rusting over time because we got a steel business. Our autos are not traded around the world, not sold around the world, and just on and on. So it's been very one-sided. And I think President Trump decided that is one of his legacies that he's going to be sure he changes, is that U.S. is going to be a manufacturing powerhouse once again.
One other thing that you said that I want to highlight it was that, because you're talking about being a powerhouse, and because sometimes people say that we're not, and that our economy is in place. And you said it in our pre-production meeting, which was, no country can live or sustain without the United States economy. I want to say that one more time. No country can sustain without the United States economy. What did you mean by that?
Well, we're the largest GDP country in the world, and so we're the largest market generally in the world. And so all countries need the United States. France needs the United States to sell wine to, and just go down the list. We're the biggest market in the world. And of course, China. China sells to a lot of countries in the world, but they could not survive without selling to the United States.
Yeah.
And so the whole idea that China came back and retaliated against Trump and said, well, if you're going to do that, we're going to do this. And he said, oh yeah, well, I'll triple that.
Yeah.
Now what are you going to do? Now I think it's 125% tariff now, that maybe it's higher, that he says he's imposing on Chinese goods. Well, that kills it. I mean, China cannot exist.
Yeah.
And so they will back off of that.
Yeah.
Trump will win that argument with China. You watch.
Geez, man, he's saying it like with a definitive there.
They need us.
Yeah.
China needs us more than we need China. Pretty simple.
Dang.
That reminds me, I think it's a quote from, I want to say Teddy Roosevelt, and he said that as a president, you should speak softly but carry a big stick.
Yeah.
President Trump carries a big stick and also talks very loudly. So I think other countries will listen to him too.
Well, and I think right now, unfortunately, we need that in some ways. He's got 4 years and he's not trying to win. I love how the other day he messed around talking about, oh yeah, maybe I could run for a third time. I'm sure. And he goes, I'm sure there's a way. My team can figure it out, as if his team really is. But, he's not running again. And so, yeah, he is. It's almost like we're doing a reset. And kind of like you're talking about with the price of cattle or beef, as they call it. Did you watch that one Saturday Night Live skit where the guy talks about cows? He goes, no, we'll call them cows. But when we sell them, we'll call it beef. And then we'll make hamburgers out of it. Did you see that one?
No, I didn't.
Oh, yeah. He goes, well, shall we sell them beef sandwiches? No, we'll call them hamburgers.
Yeah.
And but that side note, I'll have to send it to you. But I want to switch gears. I had a chance actually to visit with the governor of Wyoming a couple of months ago. He was down at NAPE, and he was on a panel there. And, they're definitely trying to get more friendly with bringing more oil and gas operators to the state to drill more oil wells. And one thing that I wanted to kind of ask you about is what's going on y'all's end, because a lot of Wyoming is part of the BLM, which is the Bureau of Land Management. So that's who actually owns the mineral rights, but yet the surface rights are something that everybody, typically that's what you buy, right? And so with everything going on over there, what are you seeing? Because I know we kind of talked about it that, there's one rumor that Trump may try to give back the royalties back to the states, or actually back to the royalty owners in some form or fashion. But also there's a big thing going on right now with the CO2 and trying to find places in Wyoming that have places to put CO2 for storage. What are you hearing about all that?
So as far as CO2 for storage, there's pore space in the earth. So, under the surface, it's not solid ground. There's cavities within the earth where there's just nothing exists.
Right.
And a court determined that the surface owner is the one who owns the pore space. And so we've been negotiating leases with pore space. So if a company who has CO2 as a product can talk to a landowner and say, we've done these studies, you have this much pore space, and then landowners can be paid to use that pore space. And so that's one way that we've really seen that. And as we kind of talked about earlier with, pore space, you have to have a way to get it there, which means more pipelines and things of that nature. And so I think that our governor, I would assume, obviously I don't want to put words into his mouth. But I would assume that he would want to kind of walk the line of wanting these projects in our state, but also wanting to make sure that landowners are treated fairly, I guess, for lack of a better word. A lot of landowners are very pro-project, but don't necessarily want the project in their backyard, but it's got to go in somebody's backyard.
Right.
And so we see a lot of conflicts in a lot of the western states, a lot in North Dakota, Montana, where there's a lot of, oil and gas production. A lot of conflicts between landowners and industry over, where these pipelines go, where the industry goes, because everybody can agree that we need these projects, we need energy, et cetera.
Right.
But where the projects are actually located is a pretty big topic of controversy.
When you talk about the porous, and you say that the courts cited that the landowners own that, that's a big deal because it is underground. And here in Texas, we all own our own minerals, or not we all, but basically the state individuals own the minerals. So in Wyoming, for that to come down is a pretty big deal. Do you think it would have been like that if Wyoming wasn't a BLM? Do you think they would have probably sided with the mineral owners and not the surface owner? Just totally random, kind of just throwing you a random question.
I think it's hard to say because there are, the minerals and the surface are separate. We have the split estate, but things like gravel a lot of times are owned by the surface owner, and that can be, you dig down and that's like underground too. Yeah. But obviously oil and gas is the minerals, and so it's really hard to say because it depends on what you're looking at, and just because it's underground doesn't necessarily mean it's part of the mineral estate.
Well, again, I know that was totally a random question there, and it's a what if, and it's hypothetical. So I just kind of curious because that's what I was thinking about after we discussed. I was like, that's real interesting that they did that, and it's like, well, Wyoming doesn't own, or the state or the federal government owns the minerals. So maybe, so it definitely was a big win for the landowners.
Well, and the reason there are some people who do own minerals in Western states, but the reason that the federal government owns so many of the minerals is because, and here in Texas and these Eastern states, it's just very different because the federal government had owned all of the West. And then they were, through the Homesteading Act and through a couple of other laws, were giving parcels to, they were selling parcels to the state or to individuals, to the railroad. But as they were getting rid of the land, they reserved their mineral rights. And so that's why the federal government owns so many minerals. Is it's not necessarily because they own, the lands. It's even when they were selling those lands, they still retain the minerals because the federal government, I guess, knew that that's a very valuable resource to have.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes I wonder about the foresight because here in Texas, Dr. Allen, correct me if I'm wrong, the second president when we were our own state was Lamar. And if I'm correct, he did something with the school endowment with the minerals. And this was like in 1839 or something. And because of that, the Texas college endowment is ridiculous because of the minerals. Is that correct?
University of Texas.
Right.
Yeah.
And
now A&M.
And A&M, yeah. And so it's just kind of funny that the federal government was doing the same thing in the 1800s. Like, we're going to hold on to these minerals just in case. Like, how would you know? Because, we didn't know about oil from that standpoint at that time. Totally off there, sorry. But Dr. Ireland, another thing about Wyoming, and you mentioned it, was that, the Trumper and all them kind of are looking at maybe bringing back that to individuals to own, and that it would be $1 trillion, and it's not like $1 or $2 trillion, right?
Well, President Trump has indicated that he leans toward the idea of, if not giving that land back to individuals, also including the mineral rights. And I don't know where that stands, but that certainly was something he's talked about. And it's a huge wealth, 150 trillion. I think that's just maybe in the West or part of the West. I don't know.
Right.
So we're talking really huge numbers in value. But of course, how you go about reversing really the history of the United States in terms of all the mineral rights and surface rights, that's a pretty big project. So we'll see if that can get done in the next 4 years.
It'd be interesting. I mean, it would be, dare I say, unprecedented. And I know Sarah said this, and I just want to highlight what people said. And is that if anybody would do it, it'd probably be President Trump. I remember you said that. I was like, well, if anybody can do it, it'd be President Trump.
Absolutely. Well, I think the perfect example of that is earlier when I was talking about the CEQ. Who would have thought that we would have a president that just unilaterally decided to cut all of the authority of a whole agency?
Yeah.
And so I do think that if something like that was going to happen, it would be under President Trump. But it's really interesting because last year, the state of Utah petitioned to the U.S. Supreme Court to take up a case where they were asking for the federal government to sell back the unappropriated federal lands. And so unappropriated federal lands are ones owned by the BLM. And it was 18.5 million acres that Utah was asking to be put back in control of the state. And so it would be interesting to see if Trump had indicated that he was in favor of that, before or after this lawsuit and or after this petition. The Supreme Court did not take up the lawsuit. A lot of people are speculating that Utah is going to try something similar to try to get a decision like that made again. But I'm wondering if that is why President Trump said that he would be interested in that.
I wonder.
It would have huge impacts on everything in the West. And it's almost even hard to imagine that how huge those impacts would actually be on every industry in the West.
Well, Dr. Ireland, as we're kind of getting to the time here, I want to give you just the platform for a minute. You've got a great Substack. What have you been seeing in the markets? What have you been seeing in the energy space? Just kind of a last minute thing here on a final word from you and how people can get in contact. What are you seeing?
A lot of it is what is going on with President Trump and his whole approach to energy, which is, pretty much you think about the world for the last 10 years or more has been moving in this anti-fossil fuel way.
Right.
And so coal was, all the regulations were against coal, and the whole idea, notion that we've all been living with is that coal is especially bad and you've got to stop using coal completely. And then the next thing was oil and natural gas, and somehow we're going to operate the economy on wind and solar, of course, which is a ridiculous idea because wind and solar requires oil and gas to make the machines, the solar panels and the wind turbines. So it was a ridiculous way that we had moved in the world, and Trump just changed that overnight. I mean, I guess it's now just yesterday, he signed the order on coal to say, we're going to start using coal again. We're going to start mining coal again. And that's good news for the areas, especially in the West.
I was about to say, coal's up there,
And
very high coal producing state.
Our coal industry was not shut down. We're exporting a lot of coal, and that'll continue, maybe on steroids now. But also, Trump had said he wants these coal-fired electricity generating plants to reopen. That's not as easy done as said, because a lot of those are closed, mothballed, junked. They can't be reopened as such. They'd have to be rebuilt. So that's a whole different problem. But I think the reset on the energy side that President Trump has done in less than 90 days is unbelievable. That we've gone from somehow we have to stop using fossil fuels to all fossil fuels are great. And I never deviated from that position. So if you read my Substack, edireland.substack.com, you will see I've written hundreds of articles saying we need all the energy we can get. All forms are good. And that's just been my background. So that's what you'll read on my Substack.
Are you going to be teaching back in the fall?
Perhaps.
All
in the
right.
spring for sure.
In the spring, okay.
Yeah, it just depends on
Energy and
how the
entrepreneurship
schedule.
at the great TCU.
That's at TCU in the Neely School of Business, but I teach energy courses to both graduate and undergraduate. Yeah.
Sarah, I want to kind of give you the same platform as we wind up and wrap it up today. It's like, what are you seeing? What are you excited about? Why is Texas the favorite state in the world? But and tell us, and of course, how people can find you and continue there.
Sure, I'm really excited to just see how deregulation continues throughout President Trump's administration. Generally, I am a huge advocate for deregulation and less centralized government. One of the things that I think is really interesting that we'll have to see how it impacts different states is when you're from a state like we had, talked about this briefly. When you're from a state like Wyoming or Texas, we're generally very in favor of our states being able to regulate and make more rules. But if you are from an industry and you're in a state like California, Oregon, Washington, those states are not in favor of their state governments running their industry because a lot of times the federal government is more reasonable than the state of California. Mm-hmm. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see not only how deregulation impacts my industries in Wyoming, but to see how those same industries, the cattle industry and other agriculture industries, are impacted in states like California. Because when you have decentralized government, you have more different rules, coming from each different state. So I think it'll be really interesting to see. I also think it'll be interesting to see how states like California that have requirements for, a certain percentage of their energy has to come from renewables. I think it'll be interesting to see if it is so much cheaper to get energy from coal and into fossil fuels that see if they back off on that a little bit, because they use a tremendous amount of energy. And so I think all of that is very exciting to see how it'll change. And I'm on Facebook, Instagram, under my name, Sarah Falen Tate. And so I try to keep up with various legal news on my social media.
You've always done a great job at that. And you're teaching right now as well, correct?
I am. I'm teaching agriculture law at the University of Wyoming. And in the fall, I'll teach agriculture law and also a regulatory and policy class. And
what I think is neat about both of y'all, you've heard me say this before, is, I don't know if you have, is that y'all act, y'all do. Y'all aren't teachers. Y'all are sharing your knowledge with students of your everyday experience. And that, in my opinion, changes the game when you have somebody sitting down talking to them, because you guys live it, breathe it, and then y'all give y'all's acknowledge back to the others. And that's what makes you two true, not beyond educators, just two people that are just sharing their knowledge with others. So I can't thank y'all enough. I will also want to say this on a fun note. I think this is both y'all's third time on the show. I am going to do something for 5-timers, like the Saturday Night, I guess it's Saturday Night. So hopefully one day we'll get y'all on again, and it'll be both y'all's 5th time on the show, whether it's in person or on Zoom. And I just cannot thank you guys enough. Sarah, thank you so much for the opportunity. Dr. Ireland, thanks for bringing substance to what I talk about here today as well. And for anybody out there that's got any questions, whether it's agriculture related, ranching related, energy related, don't hesitate to reach out to these individuals or reach out to me. And we'd be more than happy to get with you, because these two people out here today making a difference and making an actual impact in the world. And everything we have, whether it's oil and gas and agriculture, they're both commodities. So we have to work together. So thank you as always, and we'll see you again on another episode of The Crude Truth.
Again, The Crude Truth would like to thank today's sponsors: LFS Chemistry, NAPE Expo, Air Compressor Solutions, Sandstone Group, Exec Crew, Texas Star Alliance, Pecos Country Operating, and Real News Communication Network.
The easiest way to start your own podcast and TV show? Real News Communications Network. Stand out from your competition. Produce streams of high-quality social media content. Become a thought leader in your industry. With RNCN, you get to be the host. We handle everything else. Tour one of our 3 locations in Dallas, Fort Worth, and the Colony. Call 972-402-6600 866-333 or visit launchashow.com to find out more.